Listen, I need to tell someone what really happened out there. The Coast Guard report will say one thing, but that's not the whole truth. Not even close. And I'm running out of time to get this right, because they're coming for me in the morning. The trial starts next week, and my lawyer keeps telling me to shut up, but some stories need to be told exactly as they happened. 3 days ago, I was sailing with my wife Sarah when the storm hit. Now, I'm sitting in this interrogation room, staring at pages of evidence that don't make sense, answering questions I don't remember the answers to. They keep asking me about entries in my logbook, dark entries, detailed entries about maritime accidents and insurance payouts, and different ways someone could accidentally fall overboard. The thing is, I don't remember writing most of them. But let me start from the beginning, because the devil's always in the details. And this particular devil has been hiding in plain sight for longer than I care to admit. The Sarah's dream was our baby. We'd saved for 5 years to buy her, this gorgeous 42-foot sloop with classic lines and enough room below deck for 2 people to live comfortably for weeks at a time. Sarah fell in love with her the moment we walked down the dock at the marina. "She's got good bones," Sarah said, running her hands along the hull like she was greeting an old friend. "She'll take care of us if we take care of her." That was back when everything between us was perfect, when we'd spend hours planning our next cruise, spreading charts across the kitchen table and dreaming about Caribbean anchorages and Pacific sunsets. Sarah would trace our intended route with her finger, naming every stop, calculating distances and weather windows with the kind of precision that made her such a good project manager at work. The plan for this trip was simple: sail down the coast for a week, just the 2 of us. Get away from the office politics, the mortgage payments, the mounting credit card bills, all the suburban quicksand that was slowly swallowing our marriage. Sarah had been pushing harder and harder to sell the boat lately, said we needed to be practical, said we should buy a house in the suburbs, start thinking about kids, build the kind of stable, predictable life that normal couples were supposed to want. I wasn't ready for that. Hell, part of me suspected I might never be ready for that kind of cage, no matter how nicely decorated it was. The fight started before we even cleared the harbor entrance. Sarah was going through her usual safety routine, that obsessive triple checking of every line, every piece of equipment, every backup system we had on board. She does this thing when she's nervous, where she gets hyper-focused on details, checking and rechecking stuff that's been working fine for years. It's like she thinks if she just controls enough variables, nothing bad can ever happen to us. "The marine weather forecast shows clear skies for the next 3 days," I told her, watching her inspect a life jacket she'd already looked at twice. "We don't need to go through the full storm preparation protocol." "Better safe than sorry," she said without looking up, her fingers working methodically through the safety equipment locker. "You know how fast things can change out here." "You worry too much, Sarah. That's always been your problem." The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was already frustrated. We'd had this conversation a dozen times before. Sarah's need to control every possible risk versus my desire to actually enjoy the freedom that sailing was supposed to give us. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with that expression I knew too well, the one that meant I'd just crossed a line from playful teasing into actual cruelty. "My problem? Really, John?" And just like that, we were fighting.
Not the kind of bickering that couples do about whose turn it is to take out the garbage, but the deep, nasty kind of fighting that exposes all the fault lines in a relationship. The kind where you stop caring about solving the problem and start caring about winning at any cost. Sarah wanted stability, a house with a white picket fence, kids who could grow up in the same school district. I wanted freedom, adventure, the kind of life where your biggest decision was which anchorage to explore next. She thought I was being selfish and immature. I thought she was trying to trap me in exactly the kind of conventional existence I'd spent my whole adult life trying to avoid. The argument escalated fast, the way our fights always did. We had this toxic dynamic where we'd both keep pushing until someone said something truly unforgivable. Today, that someone was me. "You know what, Sarah?" I finally shouted over the wind that was starting to pick up, making the rigging sing with increasing urgency. "Sometimes I think my life would be a hell of a lot simpler if you would just disappear. Just fall off the boat and leave me alone to actually live instead of being constantly trapped by your endless worrying about everything." The silence that followed was worse than if she'd screamed back at me. Sarah just stood there for a moment, her face going through this progression of emotions: hurt, anger, and finally, something that looked almost like recognition. Like she'd just confirmed something she'd suspected for a long time. Then she turned away and started checking the rigging with mechanical precision, her shoulders rigid with the kind of fury that burns cold instead of hot. "Sarah, look, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," she said quietly, not turning around. "That's exactly what you meant, John. You've been thinking it for months." That's when the storm hit us, for real. I'm talking about a legitimate ocean storm, not just some afternoon chop that looks dramatic from shore. We're talking about 20-foot swells rolling in from the northwest, winds gusting to 50 knots and building, rain coming down in sheets so thick you couldn't see the bow of our own boat. The kind of weather that turns a 42-foot sailboat into a cork bobbing around in God's personal washing machine. The Sarah's dream handled it like the thoroughbred she was, but storms like this don't care how well built your boat is. They're bigger than human engineering, older than human civilization, and they'll kill you without malice or mercy if you make even one small mistake. We worked together to get the sails reefed down to storm configuration, years of practice and muscle memory taking over despite the emotional tension crackling between us like electricity. Sarah was good in a crisis, better than good, actually. While I fought the wheel, trying to keep us pointed into the waves so we wouldn't get rolled, she was moving around the deck, securing everything that could break loose and become a projectile. That's when I noticed her safety harness. The carabiner that clipped her to the jackline was old, really old, probably hadn't been replaced in 3 or 4 years, which is about 2 years longer than any piece of safety equipment should go without replacement on a boat that sees regular use. I could see the metal fatigue in the aluminum, the way it had gotten slightly bent and stressed from constant loading and unloading. In conditions like what we were facing, with the boat pitching and rolling like an angry animal, that carabiner was basically a time bomb waiting to go off. I should have told her, should have yelled over the storm noise and made her clip into a backup line. Should have insisted she come back to the cockpit where it was safer. But I was still angry, still thinking about our fight, still hearing her accusations echoing in my head. And for just a moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, I wondered what would actually happen if I didn't say anything. The thought was there and gone so fast, I almost convinced myself I'd never had it. Almost. "Sarah!" I called out, but my voice got swallowed by the wind and the sound of water crashing over the deck. "Your harness!" But she was already moving forward along the port side, clipped to the jackline, working her way toward the mast to finish securing the mainsail. Professional, competent, completely focused on the task at hand, despite everything that had just passed between us. I saw the rogue wave coming from about a 1/4 mile away. They call them rogue waves, but that's misleading. They're not really random. They're the result of multiple wave trains converging at exactly the wrong moment, creating these walls of green water that can be twice as tall as the surrounding seas. This one looked like it could swallow a 3-story building. The Sarah's Dream started climbing up the face of it, her bow pointing almost vertical as we rode up what felt like a liquid mountain. For a moment at the top, we hung there suspended between sky and sea, and I could see for miles in every direction, nothing but endless gray water stretching to the horizon. Then we went over the backside like we were falling off a cliff. Sarah lost her footing on the wet, angled deck, started sliding aft toward the lifelines, her boots unable to find purchase on the fiberglass that had turned slick as ice. Her harness line went tight with a sound like a guitar string snapping, and I heard the carabiner fail with a sharp metallic crack that somehow carried over all the storm noise. Here's something they don't talk about in any of those glossy sailing magazines. When someone goes overboard, especially in heavy weather, you have maybe 5 seconds to react effectively. 5 seconds to throw a life ring, activate the man overboard alarm, mark your GPS position, and start the engine. After that, in conditions like we were facing, they might as well be on the moon. I did everything right, everything exactly by the book that Sarah had made me practice dozens of times over the years. Hit the man overboard button on the GPS, threw every flotation device I could reach, fired off 3 flares in rapid succession, got the engine started, and began the search pattern we'd rehearsed so many times in calm weather that I could do it in my sleep. But Sarah was already 50 yards away and disappearing fast behind the swells. In seas that size, 50 yards might as well be 50 miles. The water temperature was maybe 55 degrees, cold enough that hypothermia would set in within 30 minutes, even with a life jacket. And I never saw a life jacket go over with her. I spent 8 hours searching for her. 8 hours running search patterns while the storm gradually blew itself out, calling her name until my voice gave out, scanning the water with binoculars until my eyes burned from the salt spray. The Coast Guard showed up around dawn, 2 helicopters and a cutter, and we expanded the search area to cover nearly 100 square miles of ocean. They called it off at sunset. Water temperature and time elapsed, the Coast Guard captain explained with professional sympathy. Even if she survived the initial immersion, hypothermia would have been fatal within 2 hours. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've been alone on the boat, drifting under engine power while waiting for the Coast Guard to tow me back to port. My radio's working, my GPS is accurate, and I've got enough fuel and water to last another week if necessary. By all objective measures, I'm safe. But that's when the weird stuff started happening. At first, it was just sounds that didn't quite fit. Footsteps on deck when I was below in the cabin. The sound of winches turning when no one was operating them.
The distinctive creak of the rigging under load, but in patterns that almost sounded like voices, having a conversation just out of audible range. I figured it was stress, exhaustion, my brain trying to process trauma by creating familiar patterns in random noise. People who survive disasters often report auditory hallucinations. It's a well-documented psychological response to extreme stress and sleep deprivation. But then I started seeing her. Sarah would appear in my peripheral vision, standing at the bow looking out at the horizon like she always did when she was thinking about something. Working in the galley, making coffee the way she had every morning for 15 years. Sitting across from me at the navigation station with charts spread out in front of her, planning our next anchorage. When I'd turn to look directly at her, she'd vanish. Just empty space and the sound of wind through the rigging. "You could have saved me," she said one evening, standing in the companionway with her arms crossed, the way she always stood when she wanted to have a serious conversation. I was definitely losing it. Had to be. Dead wives don't come back to have philosophical discussions about maritime safety procedures. "I tried to warn you," I told the empty air where she'd been standing. "You couldn't hear me over the storm." "Did you really try, John? Or did you just go through the motions because you knew what would happen if you didn't?" That's when I found the logbook entries that I don't remember writing. Pages and pages of stuff in my own handwriting, but thoughts I don't remember thinking. Detailed calculations about what life would be like without Sarah. Research into her life insurance policy and how much I'd receive as beneficiary. Methodical descriptions of different ways someone could accidentally fall overboard during heavy weather. Day 23. Sarah mentioned today that she wants to put the boat up for sale in the spring. The insurance alone would pay off most of our debt. A single person could live pretty comfortably on what we'd clear from the sale. Day 31. Big argument about money in the future. Sometimes I wonder what would happen to her. An accident of some kind. Maritime insurance pays double for accidental death. Day 38. Noticed today that Sarah's harness carabiner is showing stress fractures. Should probably replace it soon. Then again, equipment failure during heavy weather, that would be completely beyond anyone's control.
The handwriting was definitely mine, but I had no memory of putting these thoughts down on paper. It was like reading someone else's diary, except that that someone else was apparently me. "You always were a planner," Sarah said, sitting across from me in the cabin like we'd done thousands of times before. "Even when you didn't know you were planning."
"I don't understand what's happening to me," I said to the hallucination that looked and sounded exactly like my dead wife. "You understand perfectly," she replied. "You just don't want to admit it to yourself. You wanted me gone, John. Maybe not consciously, but some part of you has been working toward this for months." I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. "I loved you. I still love you." "Love and resentment can coexist in the same heart," she said with infinite sadness. "You loved me, but you also blamed me for everything that felt small and trapped in your life. The job you were too afraid to quit, the dreams you were too comfortable to chase, the man you were too scared to become." The Coast Guard found me the next morning. Professional rescue operation, textbook procedure. They were kind, efficient, appropriately sympathetic about the tragic loss of my wife in what appeared to be a straightforward sailing accident. "These things happen," they explained, "more often than people think. Heavy weather, equipment failure, someone goes over the side before anyone can react. Tragic, certainly, but not suspicious. Until they found the logbook." Captain Morrison, the investigator in charge, sat me down in the cutter's wardroom with a cup of coffee and the kind of expression that cops get right before they destroy your entire life. "Sir," he said, opening the book to a page I recognized with growing horror, "these entries here are quite detailed, almost like someone was researching different types of maritime accidents." My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't hold the coffee cup. "I don't understand what you're asking me." "Well, for instance, this entry from 3 weeks ago." He read from my own handwriting. "Harness failure during heavy weather remains most plausible scenario. Carabiner fatigue under load, especially with older aluminum hardware. Body would be swept away by current before rescue operations could be effective. Coast Guard investigation would almost certainly conclude accidental death." The words hung in the air between us like an accusation. "There's more," Morrison continued, flipping through pages covered with my handwriting. "Insurance policy details, beneficiary information, even notes about how long you should wait before resuming normal social activities to avoid appearing suspicious." "I don't remember writing any of that," I whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "That's what they all say," Morrison replied with professional detachment. "But here's where things get interesting. Your wife's body washed up on Seal Point early this morning, remarkably well preserved considering. And our marine forensics team took a very close look at that failed carabiner you wrote about." My heart stopped beating for what felt like a full minute. And it didn't fail from metal fatigue like your entry suggested it would. "Someone took a hacksaw to it.
made precise cuts that would weaken the metal just enough to fail under load. Very professional job, actually. Almost like someone researched exactly how much structural integrity to remove. The room started spinning around me. That's impossible. I would never deliberately. There's something else, Morrison interrupted, pulling out a small digital recorder, the waterproof kind that Sarah used for work interviews. We found this in your wife's jacket pocket. She apparently started recording during your argument before the storm hit. Want to hear what you said to her? Before I could object, he pressed play. My own voice filled the small room, distorted by wind and static, but clearly audible. Sometimes I think my life would be a hell of a lot simpler if you would just disappear. Just fall off the boat and leave me alone to actually live instead of being constantly trapped by your endless worrying. That's not what I meant, I said desperately. I was angry, but I didn't mean it literally. There's more, Morrison said, letting the recording continue. She kept it running right up until she went overboard. You want to know what the last sound on this recording is? I shook my head, but he told me anyway. It's you laughing. Right after the wave hit, right after she went into the water, there's about 15 seconds of you laughing like it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. I don't remember laughing. I don't remember cutting the carabiner. I don't remember writing those detailed entries about maritime accidents and insurance payouts. But apparently I did all of those things. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, irrefutable. Phone records showing I'd researched marine insurance policies online. Purchase receipts for a new hacksaw that I apparently threw overboard after using it. Even GPS data showing that I'd deviated from my stated search pattern, steering away from the most likely drift area instead of toward it. They charged me with first-degree murder, premeditated, cold-blooded, carefully planned, disguised as a maritime accident. My lawyer keeps talking about temporary insanity, dissociative episodes, the possibility that trauma could cause someone to block out memories of their own actions. But I don't think I'm crazy. At least not in any way that would hold up in court. I think I'm just a man who got exactly what he wished for, and then couldn't live with the knowledge of what he'd done to get it. The real kicker, though, the thing that keeps me awake at night in this cell, is what I found in that logbook after the Coast Guard finished processing it as evidence. Hidden between pages of my own careful planning, written in Sarah's distinctive handwriting, was a single entry dated yesterday. John always was thorough when he set his mind to something, but some secrets are too heavy for the ocean to hold forever. The water gives back what belongs on dry land, and the dead don't rest quietly when they've been murdered. Justice has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. That's impossible, of course. Sarah's been dead for 3 days. The medical examiner confirmed time of death, water temperature, all the forensic details that prove she couldn't have written anything after going overboard. But there it is, clear as daylight, in her neat script, right next to my own scrawled entries about insurance fraud and equipment sabotage. Maybe the dead don't rest easy when they've been murdered by someone they trusted. Maybe they stick around to make sure justice gets served, that the truth comes out no matter how carefully it's been hidden. Or maybe I'm finally losing whatever's left of my sanity, writing messages to myself in my dead wife's handwriting, because guilt has twisted my brain into something unrecognizable. Either way, I guess I'm about to find out. The trial starts tomorrow, and the prosecution has enough evidence to convict me 10 times over. My lawyer says we should plead guilty, try for manslaughter instead of murder 1, maybe get 20 years instead of life without parole. But here's the thing that keeps bothering me. The detail that doesn't fit with any rational explanation. I remember loving Sarah. I remember 15 years of marriage that was genuinely happy most of the time. I remember being the kind of man who would never hurt someone I cared about, not deliberately, not for money or freedom or any other reason. So, either I'm a completely different person than I thought I was, someone capable of months of careful planning to murder his own wife, or something else is happening here, something that doesn't fit into any normal understanding of how the world works. The guards are coming to take me to court in an hour. Whatever happens next, I want someone to know the whole story, exactly as I remember it, even the parts that don't make sense, especially the parts that don't make sense. Because I have this terrible feeling that Sarah isn't finished with me yet, that death isn't the end of her ability to make sure I pay for what I did, even if I can't remember doing it. The ocean keeps its secrets, they say, but apparently not forever.